I, 28F, stood at the altar, my hands trembling slightly in Liam's. The scent of white roses filled the air, a sweet perfume I'd dreamed of since I was a little girl. Everything was perfect. The soft light streamed through the stained glass windows, painting us in gentle colors. My dress felt like a cloud, and Liam's eyes held a universe of love just for me. He squeezed my hand, a silent promise that our forever was starting right now. I looked out at the faces of our friends and family, all smiling, all sharing in this perfect moment. My heart felt so full it might just burst. This was it. This was the first day of the rest of my life, and it was flawless. The officiant smiled warmly. And now, if there is anyone present who has any reason why these two should not be joined in matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. A heavy silence fell over the chapel. It was the kind of traditional, theatrical pause that always happened at weddings. A moment for a collective breath before the final vows. I smiled at Liam, my heart thumping a happy rhythm against my ribs. 1 second passed, then 2. It was almost over. Then I heard a rustle, a chair scraping against the stone floor. My smile faltered. I saw a figure move from the front pew. It was Eleanor, my future mother-in-law. My stomach twisted into a cold knot. She had always been polite to me, but there was a chill behind her eyes I could never quite place. She wasn't smiling. Her face was a mask of grim determination. Liam's grip on my hand tightened. I could feel his confusion, his shock. "Mom," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "What are you doing?" Eleanor didn't answer him. She didn't shout an objection to the whole room. She did something far worse, far more intimate and cruel. She walked directly up to the altar, her heels clicking a death march on the floor. She ignored the stunned expression on the officiant's face. She ignored her husband, David, who was trying to wave her back to her seat. She ignored her own son. Her eyes, cold and gray like a winter sea, were locked on me. She stopped right beside me, so close I could smell the sharp, expensive perfume she always wore. She reached out and grabbed my arm. Her fingers were like talons, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the delicate lace of my sleeve and the soft skin beneath. The pain was a sharp, surprising sting. Her voice was a low hiss, a venomous secret meant only for me. "He has a child." The words didn't make sense. They were just sounds, disconnected from reality. A child? Liam? My Liam? The man who cried during sad movies and spent weeks building a ridiculously elaborate cat tree for my rescue kitten? It was impossible. My mind refused to accept it. The world around me seemed to warp, the beautiful colors of the stained glass bleeding together. I stared at her, my mouth dry, my thoughts scrambling. "What?" I managed to breathe. "You heard me," she whispered, her grip tightening. "He has a baby. I couldn't let you go through with this. I couldn't let you marry a liar." I pulled my arm away from her, a sudden surge of adrenaline cutting through the fog of disbelief. I looked at Liam. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of horror and utter bewilderment. He was shaking his head, looking from his mother to me. "That's not true," he said, his voice cracking. "Mom, what are you talking about? I don't have a child, I swear." His denial was desperate, raw, but Eleanor's words had been a seed of poison, and it was already taking root in the chaos of the moment. My gaze darted from Liam's frantic face to Eleanor's cold, triumphant one. She had done this deliberately, in the most public and humiliating way possible. Why? My eyes scanned the crowd, searching for an answer, for anything that would make this make sense. The guests were murmuring, a low hum of shock and confusion rippling through the chapel. My parents looked horrified. My father had half risen from his seat, his face a thundercloud. And then I saw it. Near the back, standing partially hidden behind a pillar as if she didn't want to be seen. I saw a woman holding a baby carrier. My eyes tried to focus, to push past the dizzying unreality of the situation. I saw the baby, a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blue blanket. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat a painful thud. Who was that? Who was holding the baby? My gaze traveled up from the carrier to the woman's face. And the world didn't just stop. It shattered into a million tiny, sharp pieces. It was my sister, Chloe. She was holding the baby. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with what looked like terror. She was staring right at me, and in her arms was the living, breathing proof of the worst betrayal I could ever imagine. The two people I trusted most in the world, my fiancé and my sister. The air left my lungs in a painful rush. The white roses suddenly smelled cloying, like funeral flowers. The perfect day, the perfect life I had imagined. All of it burned to ash in a single, horrifying moment of recognition. The chapel was a blur of noise and movement, but I couldn't hear any of it. My entire universe had shrunk to the three people who had just destroyed it. Eleanor with her cruel smile, Liam with his desperate, pleading eyes, and Chloe, my own sister, standing in the back of the room holding a secret that had just torn my life apart. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I just stood there, a bride at a ruined altar, staring at the evidence of a betrayal so profound it felt like it was physically breaking me in two. Liam was still talking, his voice rising in panic. I swear to you, I don't know what she's talking about. I've never touched your sister. Mom, stop this. Eleanor played her part perfectly. She turned to me, her expression shifting from cold fury to feigned sympathy. She placed a hand on my other arm, this time with a gentle, motherly touch that felt more violating than her earlier grip. I am so sorry, dear, she said, her voice loud enough for the first few pews to hear. I know this is a terrible shock. I only found out recently myself. I had to tell you. It was the right thing to do. She then had the audacity to point a trembling finger towards the back of the church. Ask her. Ask your sister if it isn't true. Every head turned. Every pair of eyes in that room swiveled to land on Chloe, who looked like she wanted the stone floor to swallow her whole. She clutched the baby carrier tighter, her knuckles white. The baby started to fuss, a small, unhappy sound that echoed in the cavernous silence. The officiant, a kind man who had counseled us just weeks before, finally stepped forward. Perhaps we should take a moment, he suggested, his voice gentle but firm. In my office. No one argued. The walk from the altar to the small room behind it was the longest walk of my life. My beautiful white dress, the one I had spent months choosing, now felt like a costume for a tragedy. I could feel the weight of hundreds of stairs on my back. I could hear the whispers, the gasps. My dream had become a public spectacle, a nightmare unfolding for an audience. We crowded into the small wood-paneled office. Me, Liam, Eleanor, David, my parents, and finally Chloe, who was ushered in by my mother. The baby was still with her. The air was thick with unspoken accusations and raw, suffocating tension. I finally found my voice. It came out as a broken whisper. I looked straight at my sister, the person I had shared a room with for 16 years, the person who held all my childhood secrets. Chloe? I asked. What is she talking about? This was her chance to deny it, to call Eleanor a liar, to end this nightmare. But she didn't. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She stared at the worn carpet, tears streaming down her face, silently dripping onto the blue blanket in her arms. It's complicated, Anna, she mumbled, her voice choked with tears. Her words were a death sentence. Complicated. Not no. Not it's a lie. Just complicated. It was a confession wrapped in evasion, a confirmation that everything Eleanor said was true. My knees felt weak. I stumbled back, and my father caught me, his arm a steady presence in my spinning world. Liam exploded. Complicated? What's complicated? He yelled, his voice echoing in the small room. He took a step towards Chloe, his hands clenched into fists. Tell her the truth. Tell her I'm not the father. Tell her I've never laid a hand on you. Chloe flinched but remained silent, her tears her only answer. Her silence was damning him. It was condemning us both. Why? Why was she doing this? My mother, her face a mask of disbelief and pain, went to Chloe's side. Chloe, honey, you need to speak up. Is this true? Is Liam the father of your baby? Chloe finally looked up, her eyes red and swollen. She looked from our mother to me, her expression a mess of guilt and fear. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. She shook her head, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. But she didn't say the word. She didn't say no. And that was it. That was all I needed to see. The betrayal was complete. Liam was pleading, my parents were in shock, and Eleanor was watching the destruction she had caused with a look of quiet, righteous satisfaction. She had won. I couldn't stay there. I couldn't be in that room, in that dress, in that life, for one more second. I needed air. I needed to escape. I can't do this, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. It felt like someone else was speaking. I can't get married. Not like this. I turned and walked out of the office, pushing past the stunned faces. I walked back through the chapel, past the rows of guests who stared at me with pity and morbid curiosity. I didn't look at anyone. I kept my eyes fixed on the heavy wooden doors at the end of the aisle. I pushed them open and stepped out into the bright afternoon sun. The light felt harsh, too cheerful for the darkness that had just consumed my world. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to leave. I walked down the stone steps of the church, my wedding dress trailing behind me like a ghost. I left behind the roses, the promises, the man I thought I loved, and the sister I thought I knew. I left my entire life burning down behind me. The first few hours were a blur. I ended up at a cheap hotel a few miles from the church. I paid in cash, the emergency $100 bills I kept tucked in my wallet, feeling like the last remnants of a forgotten life. The woman at the front desk gave me a strange look, taking in my tear-streaked face and the ridiculously out-of-place wedding dress, but she didn't ask any questions. She just gave me a key card and pointed down a dingy hallway. The room smelled of stale smoke and disinfectant. I locked the door and slid down against it, my body finally giving in to the violent shudders I had been holding back. The sobs came then, huge, ragged gasps for air that tore through me. It was a grief so total, so absolute, that it felt like a physical assault. I cried for the future that had been stolen. I cried for the love I thought was real. I cried for the sister who had driven a knife into my back while smiling at my wedding shower just a week before. After a long time, the tears stopped. I was left with a hollow, echoing emptiness. I peeled off the wedding dress, the beautiful symbol of my dead dreams, and let it fall into a heap on the floor. I stood under a scalding hot shower, scrubbing at my skin as if I could wash away the humiliation, the betrayal. But it was branded on me. My phone, which I'd left in my clutch bag, started buzzing incessantly. A constant stream of calls and texts. Liam, my mom, my dad. I ignored them all. I couldn't speak to anyone. What was there to say? The only person I could even think of facing was Maya, my best friend and maid of honor. She had been a rock through the whole wedding planning process. I finally found the strength to text her. I'm at the Crestview Motel, room 204. Please come. And please come alone. She replied instantly. On my way. When she arrived an hour later, she didn't say anything. She just wrapped her arms around me as I stood in the doorway in a threadbare hotel towel. She held me while I cried again, this time a quiet, exhausted weeping. She led me to the bed, pulled the covers over me, and went to the vending machine down the hall. She came back with a bottle of water and a bag of pretzels, the saddest meal I had ever seen. Talk when you're ready, she said, her voice soft. I'm not going anywhere. We sat in silence for a long time. The buzzing of my phone was the only sound. Finally, I told her everything. The whisper from Eleanor, the baby, Chloe's terrified face, her refusal to deny it. As I spoke the words out loud, the reality of it settled in my bones, heavy and cold. I don't understand, I said, my voice hoarse. Why would Chloe do this? Why would Liam lie to me for all this time? It doesn't make sense. Maya listened patiently, her expression a mixture of fury and sympathy. Okay, she said when I was done. Let's think. Let's not just feel. Let's think. Does it really sound like Liam? The Liam who alphabetizes his spice rack and has a panic attack if he's 5 minutes late for a movie? I shook my head numbly. No, but Chloe, she didn't deny it, Maya. She stood there and let everyone believe it was true. Something is wrong with this picture, Maya insisted. Eleanor hates you. We've always known that. She hides it well, but she's never wanted you for Liam. This feels like a setup. It's too theatrical, too perfectly designed to destroy you. Her words were a tiny spark of logic in the emotional storm. A setup. It was possible. But Chloe was my sister. Why would she be a part of it? What could Eleanor possibly have on her that would make her detonate her own sister's life? The next day, the calls from Liam hadn't stopped. He had left dozens of voicemails, each one more desperate than the last. He begged me to talk to him, to let him explain. He swore over and over that he was innocent. Against my better judgment, I decided to see him. I couldn't move forward without hearing his side of the story, even if I was sure it would be a river of lies. We met at a quiet park, a neutral ground that held no memories for us. He looked terrible. His eyes were red-rimmed and he hadn't shaved. He looked as broken as I felt. Anna, he started, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you for seeing me. I don't even know where to begin. How about with the truth, Liam? I said, my voice flat and cold. I wrapped my arms around myself, a feeble barrier against him. The truth is, I have no idea what is going on, he said, running his hands through his hair in frustration. I have never, ever been with Chloe. I swear on my life. I love you. Only you. You have to believe me. Your mother seemed pretty certain, I countered, my voice dripping with bitterness. And my sister didn't exactly rush to your defense. My mother, he trailed off, his expression darkening. She's always been controlling, you know that. But this is insane. She's trying to destroy us, and I don't know why Chloe is going along with it. I've been trying to call her, but she won't answer. He started pacing back and forth, agitated. Think about it, Anna. Just think. When could this have happened? We've been together for 5 years. We live together. We're always together. There is no time when I could have had an affair with your sister and gotten her pregnant. The timeline makes no sense. He had a point. We were one of those couples who did almost everything together. A secret affair seemed logistically impossible. But the image of Chloe holding that baby was seared into my brain. The baby looks to be a few months old, I said, my voice clinical, detached. That means she would have gotten pregnant about a year ago. What were we doing then? He stopped pacing and looked at me, his eyes pleading. We were on that trip to Italy. For our anniversary. We were gone for 3 weeks. And Chloe was back here. How could I be the father? Italy. I had forgotten about that. We had saved for years for that trip. 3 weeks of pasta, wine, and ancient ruins. 3 weeks where we were inseparable, thousands of miles away from home. Chloe had been house-sitting for us. It was a solid alibi. A crack appeared in the wall of my certainty. Maybe it happened before that, I suggested, though my voice lacked conviction. When? He pressed. Tell me when. I will account for every single day of my life for the past 2 years if I have to. There is no version of reality where I am the father of that child. He looked so earnest, so completely devastated. The man I knew, the man I had loved, was right there in front of me, fighting for us. Could he be telling the truth? Could this all be a twisted game orchestrated by his mother? If you're not the father, I said slowly, testing the idea out loud, then why is Chloe lying? Why would she do this to me? I don't know, he admitted, his shoulders slumping in defeat. But we have to find out. Don't let my mother win, Anna. Please, don't let her take us away from each other. I didn't promise him anything. I told him I needed more time to think. But as I walked away from the park, that tiny spark of logic Maya had ignited had grown into a small, flickering flame of doubt. Doubt not in Liam, but in the story Eleanor had so carefully constructed. This wasn't a simple story of infidelity. It was something much darker, much more complex. And my sister was standing right in the middle of it. I knew my next stop had to be Chloe's apartment. I had to face her. I had to see the baby. And I had to get the truth, no matter how ugly it was. The door to Chloe's apartment building felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. My hand hovered over the buzzer for her unit, my thumb trembling. What would I say? What could she possibly say to me? After a deep breath, I pressed it. A moment later, her voice, tinny and cautious, came through the intercom. Hello? It's me, Chloe, I said. Let me in. There was a long pause. I could imagine her on the other side, her mind racing. Finally, the lock buzzed, and I pushed the heavy door open. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor. With each step I took up the worn staircase, my resolve hardened. I was not leaving here without answers. She opened her door just a crack, peering out at me. She looked even worse than Liam. Her eyes were puffy and dark-circled, and she was wearing a stained sweatshirt. She looked like a ghost. What are you doing here? She whispered. I think you know what I'm doing here, I said, pushing the door open gently and stepping inside. We need to talk. The apartment was small and cluttered. Baby things were everywhere. A playmate on the floor, a bottle warmer on the counter, a pile of tiny onesies on the couch. And in a bassinet in the corner of the living room, the baby was sleeping. I walked over to it, my heart a painful drum in my chest. He was beautiful, tiny and perfect, with a little tuft of dark hair. He looked nothing like Liam. Who is he, Chloe? I asked, my voice soft but firm. I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on the sleeping child. His name is Leo, she said quietly from behind me. That's not what I asked, I said, finally turning to face her. I asked who he is, and I want to know who his father is. Chloe wrung her hands, her eyes darting around the room, landing on anything but me. I told you, it's complicated. Uncomplicate it for me, I snapped, my patience gone. Because right now, my life is in ruins because of a complication that you created. You stood in that church and let everyone, including me, believe that my fiancé was the father of your child. Do you have any idea what you've done? Tears started to well in her eyes again. I'm sorry, Anna. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. Then why did you? I pressed, taking a step closer. Why are you lying? Because Liam says he's not the father. He says it's impossible. And you know what? I'm starting to believe him. So you're going to tell me the truth, right now. She sank onto the couch, her head in her hands. I can't, she sobbed. Why not? I demanded. Who are you protecting? Is it him? Did he threaten you, or is it someone else? She just kept shaking her head, mumbling, I can't, over and over again. Her story, the one she finally offered between sobs, was weak and full of holes. She claimed she had a one-night stand around the time Leo was conceived, a man she met at a bar. She didn't get his last name. She was ashamed and scared, and she didn't know what to do. So you decided to pin it on my fiancé at my wedding? I asked, my voice incredulous. That was your brilliant plan? To ruin my life to cover up your mistake? It wasn't like that, she cried. I didn't know what to do. I was panicking. Her panic didn't feel real. Her story felt rehearsed, flimsy. As she spoke, I noticed something. Her phone, which was on the coffee table, buzzed with a text message. She snatched it up with a speed that was unnatural, her eyes wide with fear as she quickly silenced it and flipped it over. Her movements were jumpy, furtive. She was terrified, but not of me. She was scared of something else, or someone else. And then I heard it. She used a phrase, a specific turn of words, that made a chill run down my spine. Talking about the wedding, she said, "It was a terrible situation, but sometimes you have to do the right thing, no matter how much it hurts." It was the exact same sentiment, almost the exact same words that Eleanor had used in the church office. I had to tell you, it was the right thing to do. It wasn't a coincidence. My sister wasn't acting alone. She was being coached. This whole disaster, this entire narrative had been written by someone else. And I was absolutely certain that author was Eleanor. A cold, clear resolve settled over me. The grief and confusion began to recede, replaced by a slow-burning anger. This was not a crime of passion. This was a conspiracy. Eleanor was pulling the strings, and my sister, for some reason I couldn't yet fathom, was her willing puppet. I looked at Chloe, my own sister, who was now a stranger to me. She was weak, she was scared, and she had let someone turn her against me. I wasn't going to get the truth from her today. She was too deep in whatever trap had been set for her. "I don't believe you, Chloe," I said, my voice devoid of all its earlier heat. It was now just cold. "Not one word. But I will find out the truth. And when I do, I hope whatever you're getting out of this is worth it. I hope it's worth losing your only sister." I walked out of her apartment without looking back. The image of her terrified face, the sound of the baby stirring in his sleep, the flimsy lies hanging in the air, it all coalesced into a single, hard conviction. Maya was right. This was a setup. And I was going to be the one to tear it all down. Back in the sterile quiet of the hotel room, I began to think like a detective. My grief was still there, a heavy weight in my chest, but now it had a purpose. It was fuel. I needed to understand Eleanor's motive. Why go to such extreme, cruel lengths to break up me and Liam? Hurting her own son in the process seemed counterintuitive. Unless her goal wasn't just to get rid of me, but to gain something far more valuable, control over Liam. I thought back over the 5 years I had been with him. Eleanor had never been openly hostile. She was a master of the subtle dig, the backhanded compliment. "That dress is so interesting, Anna. So bold." Or, "It's wonderful that you're so career-focused. I do hope you'll have time for a family one day." A man needs that. She painted me as an ambitious, unsuitable outsider, a temporary distraction from the kind of woman she believed her son deserved. Liam had always brushed it off. "That's just Mom," he'd say with an apologetic smile. "She's from a different generation. She means well." I had accepted it, wanting to keep the peace. Now I saw it for what it was, a quiet, patient campaign to undermine me. My wedding was simply her declaration of war. Then I remembered something Liam had mentioned in passing months ago, something about his finances, a family trust. He had complained about it lightheartedly, saying his mother held the purse strings. I hadn't paid much attention at the time, but now it seemed critically important. I called Liam. "I need you to tell me about the trust fund," I said, skipping any pleasantries. "Everything." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "The trust? Why?" "Because I think it's the motive," I said. "Tell me exactly how it works." He sighed. "It's complicated. My grandfather set it up. My dad and I are the beneficiaries, but my mother is the trustee. She has total control over the disbursements until I turn 35. "And you're 30, I stated. "So 5 more years." "Right," he said. "There's a clause in it. Something about the trustee being able to release the full amount earlier if the beneficiary is responsibly settled. My grandfather was old-fashioned." "Responsibly settled," I repeated, the pieces clicking into place. And let me guess, Eleanor gets to decide what that means. Exactly, he said, his voice grim as he started to understand where I was going. She's always talked about me marrying someone from a good family, someone who understands our world. Our world. The world of country clubs and charity galas and old money. I was from a middle-class family. My parents were teachers. In Eleanor's eyes, I was not the right kind of family. I wasn't an asset. I was a liability. She never wanted you to marry me, I said, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. Because marrying me wouldn't get you your inheritance. She would never approve it. My God, Liam breathed. You think she did all of this? For money? Not for money, I corrected him. For control. If you and I were broken up and you were suddenly a single father to a baby you thought was yours, you'd be completely dependent on her. You'd be trapped. She could mold your life, choose your next wife, and control your future, all with the power of that trust. The silence on the phone was heavy with the weight of this monstrous truth. Eleanor hadn't just tried to stop a wedding. She had tried to hijack her son's entire life. I knew I needed more than a theory. I needed proof. My next step was risky, but necessary. I had to talk to Liam's father, David. He was a quiet, gentle man, completely overshadowed by his domineering wife. He had always been kind to me in his reserved way. I hoped he would be an ally. I called him and asked if we could meet for coffee. He sounded surprised but agreed immediately. We met at a small cafe downtown. He looked tired, the stress of the past few days etched onto his face. Anna, he said, his voice full of sorrow. I am so deeply sorry for what happened. For Eleanor's behavior, it was unforgivable. Thank you, David, I said, appreciating his sincerity. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. It's about the trust. His eyes widened slightly. He glanced around the cafe nervously, as if Eleanor might materialize out of thin air. What about it? He asked in a low voice. I laid out my theory, that Eleanor's actions were a calculated move to break up me and Liam, to force Liam into a position of dependence so she could control his access to the family money and, by extension, his life. David didn't deny it. He just stared into his coffee cup, a look of profound sadness on his face. She's always been protective of Liam, he said, a weak defense. This isn't protection, David, I said firmly. This is sabotage. Was she angry when Liam proposed to me? He finally met my gaze, and I saw a flicker of something. Shame, maybe, or resentment. He nodded slowly. She was furious, he admitted. She said you weren't suitable, that you would squander the family's legacy. She said Liam was throwing his life away on a girl with no connections. There it was, the confirmation I needed. Eleanor's motive was clear as day. Now I just had to figure out how she had roped my sister into her scheme. What kind of leverage did she have over Chloe? I thought about my sister's life. She had been struggling. She'd lost her marketing job about 6 months ago and had been scraping by with freelance work. She was perpetually stressed about her rent, her car payments. A baby would have been a catastrophic financial burden. So where was the money coming from? Her apartment, while small, was filled with new baby equipment. The bassinet, the stroller, the high-end baby monitor. That stuff wasn't cheap. An ugly thought began to form in my mind. Maybe this wasn't about leverage. Maybe it was simpler. Maybe Eleanor had just bought her. The idea was so repulsive, so mercenary, that I almost dismissed it. My own sister selling my happiness for cash? But the more I thought about it, the more it made a sick kind of sense. Chloe was desperate. Eleanor was ruthless and had deep pockets. It was a perfect storm of vulnerability and manipulation. I needed a professional. I needed someone who could dig into things I couldn't. I used the last of my savings, the money we had set aside for our honeymoon, and hired a private investigator. He was a former cop named Frank. with a gravelly voice and tired eyes that told me he'd seen the worst of human nature. I met him in his cramped, dusty office. "I want you to investigate two people," I told him, my voice steady. "Eleanor Vance and my sister Chloe Miller. I want to know if there is any financial connection between them. Bank transfers, cash withdrawals, anything. I think Eleanor is paying my sister to lie." Frank just nodded, writing down the names. He didn't look surprised. "Happens more than you'd think," he grunted. "Money makes people do ugly things." While Frank started digging, Eleanor made her next move. She called me, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Anna, darling, I just wanted to see how you are," she cooed. "I know this must be so difficult for you. I truly am sorry that you had to find out about Liam's indiscretion this way. But perhaps in the long run, it's for the best. You deserve someone who is honest." The sheer audacity of her performance was breathtaking. She was the arsonist calling to offer sympathy to the person whose house she had just burned to the ground. "Don't call me Eleanor," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Her tone shifted instantly, the syrupy sweetness vanishing, replaced by a sharp, cold edge. "You listen to me, you ungrateful little girl," she hissed. "You were never good enough for my son. You should be thanking me for saving you from a marriage that was doomed from the start. Liam will see that I was right. They always do." She hung up. I stood there, phone in hand, trembling with a rage so pure and white-hot it almost scared me. The mask was off. This was the real Eleanor. Vicious, arrogant, and utterly convinced of her own righteousness. She thought she had already won. She had no idea that I was just beginning to fight. The waiting was the hardest part. For a week, I lived in a state of suspended animation, jumping every time my phone rang, hoping it was Frank with news. Liam and I spoke every day. He was my partner in this now, fully aware of his mother's treachery. He was gathering his own information, looking through old family financial records, searching for anything that could help. He discovered that Eleanor had set up a new holding company about a year ago, for investment purposes. It seemed insignificant, but we passed the information on to Frank. During that week, I felt the full weight of the social fallout. Friends of my parents called to offer condolences as if there had been a death. Mutual friends of Liam and me awkwardly chose sides. The gossip mill was working overtime. I was the poor, jilted bride. Liam was the handsome cad with a secret love child. Eleanor was the brave, protective mother. Her story was winning. I stayed hidden away, first at the hotel and then at Maya's apartment. Maya was my fortress, deflecting well-meaning but painful inquiries and keeping me supplied with tea and outrage. "We are going to burn her to the ground," she would say, her eyes flashing. Metaphorically, of course. Her ferocity was a balm to my wounded spirit. Finally, Frank called. "I've got something," he said, his voice flat. "It's exactly what you thought, but it's clean. Very clean." We met at his office. He slid a folder across his desk. "Eleanor Vance is smart," he began. "No direct payments to your sister. Nothing obvious, but that holding company your fiancé mentioned, that was the key." He explained that the company, something blandly named EV Enterprises, had a corporate bank account. And from that account, a series of regular monthly payments had been made. The first payment was 10 months ago. They were large sums, thousands of dollars each month. The recipient was a newly opened account in the name of Chloe Miller. "Bingo," I breathed, staring at the printouts of the bank statements. The dates were damning. The first payment coincided almost exactly with the time Leo would have been conceived. It wasn't a one-time payment. It was a salary. My sister was on Eleanor's payroll. "This is it," I said, a wave of vindication washing over me. "This is the proof." "It's good," Frank agreed. "It proves a financial relationship. A jury would find it very suspicious, but it doesn't prove what the money was for. Eleanor's lawyer would claim it was a gift, a loan, an act of charity to help a poor, struggling single mother." My heart sank. He was right. We had the smoke, but we didn't have the gun. We could prove Eleanor was paying Chloe, but we couldn't prove why. We couldn't prove the entire lie. So what do we do? I asked, the frustration bitter in my mouth. We need to find the real father, Frank said simply. Your sister's story about a one-night stand is garbage. Women in her situation, a planned pregnancy that she's keeping, they almost always know who the father is. We find him. We break this whole thing wide open. He asked me for everything I knew about Chloe's life over the past year. Who she was seeing, who she was friends with, where she went. It was difficult. Chloe and I had been drifting apart even before the wedding disaster. She had become more secretive, more withdrawn. But I told him what I could. I mentioned a few names of guys she had dated casually. There was one guy, I said, thinking hard. She mentioned him a couple of times. An older man. She said he was her mentor from some marketing seminar she attended. She never told me his name. An older, unnamed mentor. Frank grunted, scribbling in his notepad. That's a good place to start. Another week passed. The silence was deafening. Liam was growing more and more agitated. He had a tense, awful confrontation with his mother where she continued to play the martyr, claiming she was only doing what was best for him. He told me he barely recognized the woman he called his mother. The wedge she had tried to drive between us was instead severing her own relationship with her son. Then, late one night, Frank called again. His voice was different this time. It held a new energy. I found him, he said, and you're not going to believe it. The man's name was Arthur Harrison. He was a prominent local businessman, a real estate mogul with his face on billboards all over the city. He was in his late 50s, and he was very, very married. His wife was a well-known socialite, a woman who sat on the same charity boards as Eleanor. They move in the same circles, I whispered, the pieces falling into place with a sickening thud. Eleanor and the Harrisons. Yep, Frank confirmed. My source says Chloe and Mr. Harrison had an affair for a few months last year. He promised her the world, a job at his company. The usual nonsense. Then she got pregnant. He panicked. He's got a reputation to protect, a wife with a lot of money, and a prenuptial agreement that would ruin him if he was caught cheating. He told Chloe to terminate the pregnancy. My heart ached for my sister, just for a moment. She must have been so scared, so alone. Chloe refused. Frank continued, his voice pulling me back to the grim reality. She decided to keep the baby, and somehow, Eleanor found out. Maybe Chloe confided in her, seeing her as a powerful woman who moved in the same world as her lover. Maybe Eleanor has spies everywhere. However it happened, Eleanor saw the opportunity of a lifetime. The whole sordid picture was finally complete. It was more twisted than I could have ever imagined. Eleanor hadn't just stumbled upon a secret and used it. She had produced, directed, and financed an entire theatrical production of betrayal. She made Chloe a deal, I said, thinking it through out loud. Eleanor would solve all of Chloe's financial problems. She would pay for everything, set her and the baby up for life. In exchange, Chloe had to do one thing. Name Liam as the father, Frank finished, and do it in the most public, most damaging way possible, at the wedding. It was the perfect crime. Eleanor gets rid of you. She gets her son back under her thumb, saddled with a child that makes him dependent on her money and goodwill. Chloe gets financial security and avoids a messy public battle with a powerful married man. Mr. Harrison gets to walk away clean, his secret safe. Everybody wins. Except for me and Liam, I said, my voice trembling with a cold, hard fury. We were the collateral damage, the acceptable losses in Eleanor's twisted game of chess. I've got more, Frank said. This is the kicker. My guy was able to get me a recording. It's a phone call between Eleanor and Chloe from 2 weeks before the wedding. Eleanor is coaching her, telling her what to say, how to act, when to cry. It's all there, Anna. We've got her. A recording. the final, undeniable piece of evidence. The gun was no longer smoking. It was in my hand. I had a choice to make. I could go to the police. I could go to a lawyer. I could sue Eleanor and Chloe for defamation, for emotional distress. I could expose Arthur Harrison and watch his carefully constructed life crumble. But that wasn't the justice I wanted. A lawsuit would be long, messy, and public. It would mean reliving the trauma over and over again. Exposing Mr. Harrison would hurt his wife. An innocent party in all of this, and it would forever brand Leo as the child of a sordid public scandal. No, I wanted something more personal. I wanted to see the look on Eleanor's face when her perfect world came crashing down around her. I wanted her to be brought down not by a judge or a jury, but by me. I wanted to take back the power she had stolen from me at that altar. I called Liam and told him everything. The silence on his end was profound. I could hear his sharp intake of breath, the sound of his world reconfiguring itself around this monstrous truth about his mother. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. "She's a monster," he said. "She's not my mother. She's a monster." "I know," I said softly. "The question is, what do we do now?" "We destroy her," he said. And for the first time since the wedding, I heard the steel return to his voice. "We take everything she cares about, her reputation, her control, her perfect family image, and we burn it to the ground." We began to form a plan. It had to be on our terms, at a time and place of our choosing. We needed to control the narrative, just as she had. The perfect stage for this final act presented itself quickly. Eleanor hosted a formal family dinner every Sunday. It was a tradition she cherished, a weekly performance where she played the role of the gracious matriarch of a perfect family. It was her court, and we were about to hold a trial. The Sunday dinner was just 3 days away. We spent the time preparing. I got copies of everything from Frank. The bank statements showing the payments from Eleanor's company to Chloe, his detailed report on the affair with Arthur Harrison, and, most importantly, the audio file of the recorded phone call. We were armed and ready. Liam called his mother to confirm we would be there. He played his part perfectly, sounding subdued and beaten. "Anna and I have been talking," he told her, his voice heavy with false resignation. We think you might have been right. Maybe it is for the best. We'd like to come on Sunday to talk things through, to figure out how to move forward." Eleanor's triumphant glee was audible even over the phone. "Of course, darling," she said, her voice syrupy with victory. "I'm so glad you're finally seeing things clearly. We'll be waiting for you." She also insisted that Chloe and the baby be there. "We are all a family now," she had said. "We need to present a united front." It was perfect. She was gathering all the players for us. When Sunday arrived, I felt a strange sense of calm. The nervous, heartbroken bride was gone. In her place was someone I barely recognized, a woman with ice in her veins and a clear, singular purpose. I chose my outfit carefully. A simple, elegant black dress. I felt like I was dressing for a funeral. The funeral of Eleanor's life as she knew it. We drove to his parents' house in silence. When Liam reached over and took my hand, his was cold but steady. "Ready?" he asked. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," I replied. We walked up to the grand front door of the house I had once dreamed of being a part of. Eleanor opened it herself, a brilliant, triumphant smile on her face. She was wearing pearls. "Liam, Anna, I'm so glad you came," she said, ushering us into the immaculate foyer. David was there, looking relieved and hopeful. And in the living room, sitting stiffly on the edge of a silk sofa, was Chloe. She was holding Leo, who was sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the storm that was about to break over his head. Chloe wouldn't look at me. We went through the motions of a civilized greeting. Eleanor offered us drinks. We sat down in the formal living room, the air thick with unspoken words. Eleanor, ever the director, decided to begin. "Well," she said, beaming at us all, "I know things have been difficult. But I'm so proud of you both for being mature enough to accept the situation and move on. Now we can begin the process of healing. As a family. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment before I spoke. We're not here to heal, Eleanor, I said, my voice calm and even. We're here to talk about the truth. Eleanor's smile tightened. The truth? Anna, dear, the truth is out, as painful as it is. No, Liam said, his voice hard as stone. He was looking directly at his mother. The truth is not out, but it's about to be. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder. I placed it on the polished coffee table between us. Let's start with this, I said, sliding the first set of papers across the table. These are bank statements for a holding company called EV Enterprises, your company. And these, I continued, sliding over a second set, are the statements for a new account opened by my sister Chloe. Do you see the pattern, Eleanor? A payment every month for the last 10 months. From you to her. The color drained from Eleanor's face. David leaned forward, peering at the papers with a confused expression. Chloe let out a small, strangled gasp. I was helping her, Eleanor stammered, her composure beginning to crack. She's a single mother in need. It was an act of charity. Was it charity, Eleanor? Liam asked, his voice dripping with contempt. Or was it a payment for services rendered? The service of lying, of destroying my life, of destroying our relationship? That's a ridiculous accusation, she snapped, her voice rising. Liam, she is poisoning you against me. Can't you see that? The only poison in this room is you, Mom, he shot back. You did this. You planned this whole thing. You have no proof, she shrieked. Actually, I said, my voice cutting through her hysteria. We do. I took out my phone and placed it on the table. I believe everyone here will find this conversation very illuminating. I pressed play, and Eleanor's voice filled the room, cold, calculating, and utterly monstrous. You need to be convincing, Chloe. You have to cry, but not too much. You must look terrified, not malicious. When Anna asks you, you don't answer directly. You just say it's complicated. Let her fill in the blanks. Let her convict him in her own mind. The recording continued, a masterclass in manipulation. Eleanor's voice laid out the entire plan, every beat of the performance, every lie Chloe was to tell. When it was over, the silence in the room was absolute. It was a silence of pure, unadulterated horror. David was staring at his wife as if he had never seen her before. His face was a mixture of shock and disgust. Chloe was openly sobbing now, her face buried in the baby's blanket. Eleanor was ashen. She looked from the phone to Liam's face, her mouth opening and closing like a fish, but no sound came out. She had been so sure of her own cleverness, so certain of her victory. She had never imagined that her own words would be her undoing. How could you? David finally whispered, his voice shaking. He is your son, Eleanor. Your only son. How could you do this to him? Eleanor finally found her voice, but it was weak, desperate. She tried to spin it even now. I was protecting him. I was protecting our family. From her, she was a gold digger, a nobody. She would have ruined him. She didn't ruin me, Mom, Liam said, his voice low and dangerous. You did. You tried to ruin me. You tried to ruin Anna. You are not my mother. You are a sick, twisted woman who cares more about money and appearances than your own child's happiness. He stood up. We're done. You and I are done. I never want to see you or speak to you again. Eleanor let out a cry of despair. No, Liam, please. You don't mean that. Every word, he said coldly. I then turned my attention to my sister. She looked up at me, her face a mess of tears and mascara. Anna, Don't, I said, cutting her off. Don't you dare say you're sorry. You weren't sorry when you took her money. You weren't sorry when you stood in that church and destroyed my life. You made a choice, Chloe. You sold my happiness for a monthly payment. I let that hang in the air for a moment. Then I delivered the final blow. Frank, my investigator, was very thorough, I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. He didn't just find the bank records. He found everything. He found Leo's real father. Chloe's head snapped up, her eyes wide with a fresh wave of terror. Arthur Harrison, I said, letting his name fall into the poisoned atmosphere of the room. I imagine his wife would be very interested to learn about his affair. And his secret child. I wonder what that would do to his reputation. To his marriage. Chloe broke completely. Her sobs became hysterical. No, please, Anna, don't. You can't. It will ruin everything. Please. You should have thought of that, I said, my voice devoid of any sympathy, before you decided to ruin my life. That was the moment David finally stood up to his wife. He walked over to her, his face a mask of cold fury. Get your things, Eleanor, he said, his voice shaking with rage. I want you out of this house. Tonight. I'll have my lawyer contact yours in the morning. David, no, she pleaded. You can't do this. This is our home, our life. You destroyed our life, he said, his voice breaking. You destroyed our family. With your lies and your obsession with control, it's over. Eleanor had lost everything she valued in the space of 10 minutes. Her adoring son, her compliant husband, her perfect family image, her power. It was all gone. She stared around the room, her face a canvas of disbelief and horror, as the beautiful world she had so carefully constructed shattered at her feet. Liam and I stood up. We didn't say another word. We just turned and walked out of that house, leaving the wreckage of 3 lives behind us. As we stepped out into the cool evening air, I felt a profound sense of release. It wasn't joy. It was the quiet, grim satisfaction of justice served. The war was over, and we had won. The days that followed were a quiet whirlwind of fallout. True to his word, David filed for divorce from Eleanor. The whispers among their social circle turned from pity for the poor mother whose son was betrayed to shocked condemnation of the woman who orchestrated the whole affair. Eleanor became a pariah overnight, her reputation in tatters. She tried to contact Liam, sending long, rambling emails that swung between manipulative apologies and bitter accusations. He blocked her number and her email address. He was done. My own reckoning with Chloe was quieter, but no less final. I agreed to meet her one last time. At the same park where I had met Liam. She came alone, having left Leo with a babysitter. She looked small and broken. She started to apologize the moment she saw me, the words tumbling out in a desperate, tearful rush. I held up a hand to stop her. I'm not here for apologies, Chloe, I said, my voice calm. I'm here to say goodbye. Her face crumpled. Anna, please, don't say that. I made a mistake, a terrible, horrible mistake. But I was so scared. He was going to leave me with nothing. So you took Eleanor's deal. I finished for her. I understand desperation, Chloe. I really do. But what I don't understand is how you could look me in the eye at my bridal shower, hug me, and tell me how happy you were for me, knowing you were planning to detonate my life just a week later. That wasn't desperation. That was a choice. You chose money over me. You chose yourself over your sister. I can make it up to you, she pleaded. I'll do anything. There is nothing to make up, I said, the finality of it settling between us. You can't fix this. We are not sisters anymore. You are just a person I used to know. I saw the hope die in her eyes, and for a fleeting second, I felt a pang of the old love I used to have for her. But it was like feeling a phantom limb. The connection was gone. What about him? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Arthur Harrison? I'm not going to tell his wife, I said. Not for your sake, and not for his, but for Leo's. That little boy is innocent in all of this. He deserves a chance at a life that isn't defined by a public scandal before he can even walk. What you do from here is your business. But it's a business that I want no part of. I turned and walked away, leaving her weeping on the park bench. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, but it was necessary. The trust between us was not just broken, it had been pulverized. There was no coming back from that. With the drama behind us, Liam and I focused on rebuilding. The idea of a big wedding now seemed ridiculous, tainted by the memory of what had happened. So, we eloped. We flew to a small coastal town and got married on a beach at sunset, with only a handful of strangers as our witnesses. It was simple, quiet, and profoundly real. As we said our vows, with the waves crashing on the shore, I knew that our love was stronger than ever. It had been tested by the most extreme fire, and it had not burned. It had been forged into something unbreakable. We used the money we had saved for the big wedding and the honeymoon to put a down payment on a small house in a town a few hours away. A fresh start. A place with no memories of Eleanor, no ghosts of the past. It was our sanctuary. Liam started looking for a new job, wanting to be completely free of any financial ties to his family's name or influence. Life became quiet. Normal. We painted our new house. We adopted a dog. We found a favorite local pizza place. The gaping wound of the betrayal slowly began to scar over. There were still moments, of course. A passing mention of a family get-together would make my stomach clench. Seeing a baby in a stroller would sometimes bring back the image of Chloe in the church. But the moments became fewer and farther between. We were healing. About 6 months after our elopement, a letter arrived. It was from a law firm. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was a formal notice informing me that I might be called as a witness in a family court case between Chloe Miller and Arthur Harrison. He was fighting her on custody and child support, claiming she was an unfit mother and was attempting to extort him. It was going to be a nasty public fight. I stared at the letter, at the names on the page, and felt a profound sense of distance. It was a mess, a disaster of their own making, and I was blessedly, wonderfully far away from it. I threw the letter in the trash. Liam came into the kitchen and saw the look on my face. "What's wrong?" he asked, his arms coming around me. "Nothing," I said, leaning back against him. "Absolutely nothing is wrong." I looked out the window at our small backyard, at the new life we were building from the ashes of the old one. The girl who stood at that altar, so full of naive trust and fairy tale dreams, was gone forever. The woman who stood in her place was different. She was stronger. She was more cautious. She had learned the hard way that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who will hurt you the most deeply. Eleanor and Chloe had tried to break me. They thought I was a fragile doll they could shatter and discard. But they were wrong. They didn't break me. They just showed me how to fight back. They taught me that sometimes the most important promises are not the ones you make to other people, but the ones you make to yourself. To protect your peace, to defend your happiness, and to never ever let anyone else write your story for you. They had learned, finally, what it felt like to be small, to be powerless. And I had learned what it felt like to be free.